Welcome to the Just in Time Cafe Go Lean Six Sigma.com's official podcast, where we help you build your problem-solving muscles. We share best practices from over 20 years of success, helping organizations from the Fortune 500 to small and medium-sized business to government achieve their goals using Lean Six Sigma.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Tracy, how are you?
I'm great, but I really need a cup of coffee today.
Make mine iced, and let's go in the private dining room. It is really noisy here.
Okay, sounds great. I'll meet you in there.
Okay. Tracy, do you want to hear what's on today's menu?
Yes.
All right. We have some cool stuff coming up. So on the appetizer, we've got how something as unrelated as a security badge cut down on hospital infections. Very intriguing.
Ooh.
Yeah. And on our bulletin board, we're going to find out why Kings County bus maintenance was walking the distance from Seattle to Death Valley yearly. And
What?
I know. That's intriguing.
Those people must be really in shape.
And or tired. And then and then you've got next up another piece of news. We've got lean troubles in hospital healthcare. So we'll take a look at what that was about. All right. Under tools of the trade, this time we're going to do a book review. We're going to cover a groundbreaking business book, and we're going to find out what elephants have to do with change. How's that for intriguing?
That sounds really intriguing. I'm really excited about that topic.
Okay. And today we've got a special request. This is about tools to get buy-in. So we'll come back to that. And then today's special, we've got an interview with a brand new black belt and how he made big changes happen with the tool or tools as simple as a camera.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. So I'm very anxious to hear, Elizabeth, tell me, what do badges have to do with hospital infections?
I'm glad you asked. So this came about in an interesting twist, an experience I had with two different clients. So one, I was starting to work with a hospital improvement team, and they were basically trying to decrease pediatric infections for a certain procedure. And after doing some root cause analysis, data analysis, they discovered that the root cause of infections going up was people not changing an insertion within 12 hours. So that was clear. The problem was you had shift changes, you had nurses coming and going. So there wasn't a through line of healthcare representatives, and that made it hard. Then, just serendipitously, I was with another client, and when I was in the lobby and they gave me a visitor's badge, it was photosensitive. So throughout the day, the badge turned from white to red, and by the end of an 8-hour day, it basically said stop in big red letters. And it gave me the idea, if there's that kind of technology, can't we bring that back to the hospital? Can't that be pasted right on the insertion such that after 12 hours, the badge would turn red and people would know it was time to change it? And they did it. They actually turned the technology or were able to purchase the technology, and they went from 30% infections down to 2%. So,
wow.
Yeah. And we've got some links to the different technology to do that, but that's wild, isn't it?
It is really wild. And what I love about this is it's visual management. You're just at a glance able to know when something needs attention. And that's the whole point of visual management. That is perfection.
Isn't it?
It is.
It's also kind of a Kanban, isn't it? It's saying time for the next step in this procedure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be. You know, I know that it's not specifically related, but I was in a hospital recently and they actually have colored booties for all of their patients based on their pain level. So you know right away if a patient is in a great deal of pain, which I thought was really interesting in one glance, right? So you didn't have to tell 17 people that you're in pain.
That's so simple and so basic, right? You have to have something on your feet. Why not make it give some information to the healthcare people?
Absolutely. And so if there's more at a glance, less mistakes will happen.
Yeah. And in hospitals, that can mean the difference between, life or death, or just healing faster or not.
Yes.
It has very human repercussions. So I think that's a great place to see it.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. So Tracy, up next, we've got our bulletin board, and you've got some information on back to healthcare, some troubles with bringing lean or continuing the lean program. Can you say more about it?
Yes. So this is about a hospital who unfortunately has a new CEO coming in. So it's called Presence Health Rethinks its Lean Initiative. This was in the news recently, and they have a new CEO coming in. They've been practicing lean since 2002. And unfortunately now, the new position, the new leader is, well, in quotes, not a fan of lean. So what's happening is now they're scrambling to find out, how they can show that there is value to lean to the top leader. So, staffers are able to, drop turnover time from an average of more than 30 minutes to less than 25, but it also has increased revenue by 600,000 over the course of a year. And, it's really unfortunate because healthcare is one of those places that we've seen a lot of significant improvements just in even small incremental changes. And it just makes me sad to hear about a CEO coming in questioning the validity or, how lean works. And it makes my heart sink.
Yeah. And I think doubly so, but we'll talk about this later, that you would think the rational information, that data, would prove the point. But obviously there's something else happening for that leader. But you and I both know much depends on leadership. So without it, you're sunk. So that's difficult. That's a difficult one. Well, I'm going to tell you a little more of a lightning one, right?
Right. Yes. And is this related to your walking the distance from Seattle to Death Valley by some King County people?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. These guys discovered, this is again in the news, in the Lean Six Sigma Roundup that's always on the website. You can go to the homepage and under blogs. These come out weekly, which I find these always fascinating. So these guys were walking 1,000 extra miles a year. And this was based on a layout change. But they basically said, hey, let's try lean. And Seattle has been great at applying lean to government processes. So this was bus maintenance. And they basically came back to, hey, lean means creating more value for customers with fewer resources. I love it when people tie things up succinctly like that. So operating on that premise, they said, why can't we apply it to maintenance? The typical application is understood to be manufacturing, but you and I both know it's all over the service industry, transactional processes. So of course they could apply it to maintenance. Then they did some digging. They found out they had excess inventory, lots of extra parts and tools. They were waiting around for jobs to do, the waste of waiting. They often do the same job twice because they didn't have good maintenance records. So again, you've got defects, rework. And they said, all that waste amounts to money. So this article details all the tools they used, the time and motion studies, really fascinating in terms of what they went after to basically eliminate that 1,000-mile hike to the Death Valley, which is a nice, end of the road result, which is great.
Yes. Wow. What I really like about that is it's one thing to share the numbers, right? Which is 1,000 miles, but it's another to say that's like walking from Seattle to Death Valley, and that to me is actually an example of something we're going to be talking about in our next segment, which is about this book, Switch, because it does talk about how, you can share numbers with lots of people, but you got to motivate the elephant too. And so I think that's actually an example of that, which is kind of funny.
Before we go there, because I love that book, and you and I both love that book, I want to give you one more personal example of looking at waste just in your own processes. This was a great example. If you think about people who are constantly short of cash, like, where are we wasting money? And this is a colleague of mine who said he looked at what he was spending on Starbucks every month, just added it up, said, hey, I keep going out and getting coffee, so let me just add this up. And he said when he looked at the total every month, he could have leased a car. And he said, and not just any car, I could have leased a nice car for that amount. Again, these are great examples, like the walk to Death Valley, the be able to lease a car. Anyway, those things I think speak to people. So it's great if you can come up with an example like that. And that's that's some of what they used in the book. So next up, let's dive into the book Switch by Chip and Dan Heath and find out, what do elephants have to do with change? Tracy, tell us.
Wow. I mean, that is a big thing. There's a lots of analogies with elephants, the elephant in the room, those kinds of things. But this is actually one of my favorite books. And it's basically, the book is called Switch, and the premise of it is how to make change easy when change is hard. And usually change is hard when you don't have any authority, right? So you have to use your influence, if you will, to make change hard, or to make change easy. Sorry about that. So the Heath brothers did all of this research. They researched all different kinds of success stories in terms of significant and successful changes. And they didn't research just top leaders. They researched peers. They researched people that had no authority. And what they found was that there are 3 things that are present in every successful change. And they call these 3 things directing the rider, motivating the elephant, and shaping the path. So I think the mistake people make when they read this book is they say, oh, I just got to do one of these things. No, you got to do all 3 of these things.
Yeah.
So that's really important. So let's talk a little bit about what each of these are, just briefly, so people understand. And then we can talk about what we really like about it. Would that be okay?
I like it.
Okay. So direct the rider is our analytical brain. It really talks, that's where we talk numbers. We talk numbers. It's what is common sense, if you will, from an analytical, rational perspective. And we tend to talk at that piece all the time in business. The numbers, it shows this, we got to do it. But the issue is we never motivate the elephant, or we sometimes miss motivating the elephant. And the elephant is the emotional side of making decisions. And my favorite example of this is, we all know we're supposed to eat right. We all know we should be eating the vegetables and the lean steak, but our emotional side wants the chocolate sundae. So we have to motivate the elephant. We have to motivate the emotional side. And people forget to do that in change. They think the numbers are going to just support and make change happen in itself, but it doesn't. So I really like motivate the elephant in particular, because I think that's the step that gets missed most often when people try to make change happen.
Yeah.
And finally, shape the path. And shaping the path is really show them the way. Right. So, and there's lots of techniques in there around shaping the path and I'll share a few of them that I like, but you have to do all 3. So that's just a brief summary. You have anything to add to that, Elizabeth?
No, I think that you're right about number 2, and motivate the elephant, that the emotional side is what gets dropped. Business thinks that it's all about the rational information, just giving people directions, just giving them the data, and we're done. And your lean healthcare example showed clearly that's not always going to work.
Yes. And I think what's funny is someone had said, yeah, it's kind of like when your girlfriend tells you, I don't think I love this guy. Are you going to try to convince her by talking about, the benefits of tax returns with, when you file together? No.
Yeah. But he's got good hair. I guess that's not doing it for me, right?
Right. It's not, that's great. Sure. It makes rational sense, but emotionally it's not. We gotta speak to that.
Yeah. There was a great example that he gave, and this was a student intern saw that this company was ordering 424 different kinds of gloves. And he saw that a lot of them were very close, if not identical, but they range from like 95 cents to, $400. So there was a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And what he did was, since he couldn't get any traction just saying, hey, why are we doing this? There's so much. It costs so much, logical. He finally just bought all 424 different pairs. He put them on a table and he invited the executive vice presidents in to see this humongous mound of gloves. And they were like, oh my God, what an incredible waste. These are like identical gloves. So they said, take it on the road. And he took this traveling glove show on the road to the different divisions in this manufacturing company, and they completely altered it and dropped it down to 5 different pairs. So humongous change with that emotional shock of the mound of gloves.
Right. Yes. I think that's a great example of, you can show them the numbers and people just might think about it and, scratch their chin and go, yeah, okay, that's interesting. But when you motivate the elephant and you've got that big pile of gloves, that is really sending a message and creates that emotional connection. And I think that's exactly what you were talking about with King County. When you said, we saved over 1,000 miles a year. And then you actually say, well, that means we could walk from Seattle to Death Valley. I mean, that is motivating the elephant. Like, wow, that's a visual. Like, oh, yeah, I get it now.
Yep.
So great examples of that.
Yeah. And then when I read that, I thought I was, once again, working with a healthcare group. And one of the people on the team was trying to look at what does it cost to throw away all of the items in hospital rooms every time they turn a room over for a new patient. And nobody knew what it cost because there's no prices on those things. So he put them all in a big bag with the labels of prices on them to show them what they were throwing away each time. And it caused them to rethink the numbers, the levels, and how many things they kept in the room. But it was just, once again, put it into a visual, make it real.
Yes.
Like so up next, we've got a special request, Tracy. And for this one, there was a question coming in from one of our readers. So in your experience, what is the best technique you have to get buy-in for continuous improvement from skeptical leaders and stakeholders in the business? Man, that is timely and very tied in with our earlier conversation.
It really is. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I picked it, because it's very true. And I will say this, Jack Welch, who used to be the top person at GE, where I worked, he actually attended a conference and he actually got this very question from someone in the audience. And do you know what his answer was?
What?
Go find someplace else to work. Yeah. He actually said, look, if your leaders aren't bought in, then move. Go to an organization where they are, because that's going to be a lot easier. And so that was kind of shocking. And okay, thank you.
Wow.
But let's talk about maybe some other opportunities, because I think it kind of speaks to, look, leadership is really critical, as we have seen in this news roundup that we just talked about. And if your leaders aren't on board, it really makes it difficult. And so there are a couple of things that you could do. One of them is that you take them on a tour of a lean organization, hopefully one that they admire. They see the tools in action, and then they have a vision of, or a sense of what could be in their organization. I think this is the most effective, easiest way to help leaders see why they should do something like that. Because they, usually these tours, they meet the owners, they get to see how they're reacting to their employees. They actually get to visualize how lean is working in this organization. And that is the most powerful thing that you can do. And there's lots of places that do lean tours. You just have to find them. As an example, Taylor Guitars here in San Diego does tours every day at 1:00, except on Fridays. And there's a lot of organizations in Washington. I've been doing a lot of work up there in Washington lately. And there's many people like Genie, Kaz, FastCap, they all do lean tours. So that would probably be my biggest recommendation, is to find a tour and take your top leadership there.
And literally give them a vision of what could be.
Yes.
Not talk about it, show them.
Show them, exactly. And the beauty of that is now they can create their own vision for their own organization, which leaders love to do typically. They say, well, this is how I see it working for us. And they get to change, make changes in the way that they want. So they're designing the vision, and then they're inspiring others to see that vision. And then the other piece that you could do is that you could have them listen to some of their peers, leader peers in forums, or share some success stories in terms of organizations. And sometimes, sometimes this could actually be good, because let's not forget that sometimes people think lean is a cost-cutting initiative, which is terrible that people think that, where it's a headcount reduction. It's not. And so sometimes they just don't understand it. They just, I know it's hard to believe, because this is our world, you and me, Elizabeth, for like how many years or how many decades? And so it's shocking to sometimes see that people in very high leadership positions still don't understand what lean can do for an organization, but they're out there.
Yeah, they are. And the other thing I like is a proof of concept project, where you can say, hey, here is proof, do a quick one, do a small one, contain, but let people viscerally feel it and see it for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So up next, why don't we talk about today's special? So Elizabeth, you interviewed a brand new black belt who didn't have the authority to make some significant changes, which is related to our book Switch. So tell us a little bit about your interview.
This is Jeff Owens. and he's from a manufacturer, and he basically saw he wasn't going to make things happen right away or all by himself. He needed the teams. And just by taking photographs of what was happening on the floor, he made a huge difference. So this is his descriptions are great. He actually did a great project. We'll have that up on our website as well. His photos really tell the story of what happened. And those photos made the difference, I think, with his team as well. So that'll be fun to hear.
Great. Wonderful. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our daily special. Today's guest is Jeff Owens. He's a quality engineer at Old Castle Building Envelope out in Terrell, Texas. Jeff, thanks for joining us here at the cafe. And why don't you share a little bit about yourself with our guests, with our audience?
Yeah, Elizabeth, good to be here. Really going to enjoy me a nice beverage. A little bit of my background. I joined right out of school, jumped into the telecom field, spent a little time in a regulatory department at AT&T, was there maybe a little over 10 years or so. Jumped into the manufacturing sector right around 2008 with a company that built industrial hand tools in an area just east of Dallas, Texas. That's where I first, I would say, learned the lean methodologies and stuff that would kind of trigger my desire to do a little deeper dive into the Lean Six Sigma world. Back in 2012 is whenever I joined OBE as a quality engineer. Just to give you a little background on what we do here. We're a leading supplier of products specified to close the building envelope. And what that means is things including custom engineered curtain walls, window walls, architectural windows, storefronts, systems, doors, skylights, even architectural glass. Work in the metal processing facility here in the Terrell, Texas department that produces the aluminum that's used to make these systems. My role is in the quality continuous improvement spectrum, and we're kind of charged with finding ways to eliminate waste, implement cost savings projects, and help streamline processes with our sister plants throughout the United States.
That's great. Thank you for the outline. I had a basic idea, but you gave me a nice visual there, especially with architectural windows. So just for everyone's education, the reason we reached out to Jeff is because he's a new black belt, Lean Six Sigma black belt, and he recently completed a really fascinating project on reduction of scrap and waste within one of the processes he just mentioned. And Jeff, you described that you were able to reduce scrap and waste fairly significantly. I think as I recall, your baseline level of scrap was around 50%. It didn't mean you couldn't rework stuff, but that's pretty high as far as scrap goes and waste. So would you mind giving an overview of that project to our listeners?
Will do. Yeah, we had a terrible, as you mentioned, the 50%. Our yield, our first pass yield was just awful. First of all, I'll give you a little bit of a background on how the processes work here. A metal processing plant, you have essentially three departments. You have extrusion department where we take metal logs and extrude them into shape, size of our doing. Then they flow into an anodizing department where we'll put a little chemical coating onto it, and then from there it'll go to a paint department. That's the last line of the process before we ship it out. So what we were having was the bent scratch damage is how we guide our material, how we gauge our success of the material flowing through the plant. And that was the biggest issues we were having. So the project was geared toward reducing that scrap of bent scratch damage material within our material handling department. Now, the material handling department will only touch the material after it's extruded. So they really don't have a whole lot to do with the first process, but they are the bloodline into the transfer of material from there on out. In 2015, our scrap was projected to jump about 300%. It was sitting for that one department only, material handling, or one group. It was sitting at about a little over $5,800 a month in comparison to a little over $2,100 a month for the same period, 2014. Project goal was to reduce it by 50% down to a little, 29, 25, I guess would be the 50% number there over a month. But Eventually, over the next 3 to 4 months, we were able to drop it down all the way to a little over $1,300 a month, lowest amount at that time that we had seen in the previous year and a half. One way we got there was designing more efficient racks for them to use throughout the plant. We improved employee cross-training. We were able to establish control charts, monitoring plans to help sustain these improvements. We also had to improve our standard work instructions. We have a lot of turnover in some of the lower areas, so we had to find a way to reach out to everybody we could and get that skill set across the plant. We were able to create a better storage area and eliminated a big issue we had in wasted motion transportation due to a bottleneck there of a poor layout. Other issues addressed were simply by implementing or pulling the trigger on improvements that should have already been in place. Things like lighting, spacer covers. As you can imagine, we have stacks and stacks of material on each dolly, so the slightest bit of coverage can go a long way. Yeah. Rack covers, shavings on the material after it's extruded, just properly tying down material, because we have somewhat of a campus here. We reach from across another street, across a parking lot. We have quite a bit of square footage to cover.
Yeah. You did a nice job of documenting what was going on there with your camera. I mean, you gave us visuals on exactly what scratched meant, what the filings looked like, things like that. So it was a pleasure to look at that, and it really helped bring to life the work that you did. So I'm curious, you had obviously success. Have you been able to maintain those gains?
Yes, we have, Elizabeth, and we've even been able to I'd say take it to the next level. While the project was mainly focused on the material handling and the scrap numbers from 2015, one thing we identified from 2015 was that 91% of all of our scrap for the bent scratch damage was occurring after the extrusion process. So it was totally in the hands of our material handling department and everything thereafter. And of that 91%, 50% was not being caught until the paint department. And as I mentioned earlier, that is our last line of defense. And I'll get into the value add things here in a minute. But I mean, when we're not catching things till the very last line, we're wasting that value add, wasting the time that we put into it. Since they don't take it over until after that extrusion process, it just showed how inefficient we were, from flowing into the anodizing and paint departments. But since the completion of the project, things have changed drastically. We were able to roll out the new racks, the training, the work instruction, the storage alone dropped down a little over 1,500 square foot from travel we were moving some material on. So far in 2016, only 44% of all of our scrap is occurring after the extrusion process, and that number has dropped down to a measly 5% that is being found in our paint department. They've made the biggest strides, but it shows you that we're catching these things earlier in the process.
Yeah, that's great. It's actually interesting. This is kind of one of those things that came up. I don't know if you ever read The Goal by Ellie Goldratt, but one of the things he pointed out was if you caught things early in the process, then you weren't wasting time, right? Because you're saying if things got fixed early on or tossed out early on, then you weren't wasting time adding value to it and basically lowering your throughput because it had to get tossed out further down the line. So I think that was really interesting.
Yep.
One thing you mentioned was it was hard to focus on fixing the process because everybody just wanted to get product out, right? And even though scrap was at 50%. So it's a tough thing. We often find that with process improvement. People say, well, I can't take the time out to fix it because I'm busy doing it. And we're thinking, well, you don't have time to do it right, but you got time to do it twice. So you were in that same position. So how did you get people on board to address the scrap issue?
Yeah, I would think that's a common problem that just about anyone would come across in a production or manufacturing facility. The best way we were able to get the attention there was quite simply the data. We were able to highlight a problem that was, well on its way to a 300% increase. You throw a number like that out, you're going to get some attention, some eyeballs put on it.
Yeah.
But what really helped is we were able to sell this project as an opportunity to create best practices at our other facilities. And that really helped us get the stakeholder buy-in that we needed.
Okay. So then once you started the project, you mentioned that a number of the DMAIC tools made a big difference. Can you talk about how the process walk in particular helped on this one?
That was great. The biggest reason that we benefited the most from it was at the time we started this project, we were just not really big on such a lean culture. So grabbing a bunch of people and trying to go walk and identify waste was really a concept that had never really been done. But being able to walk the process, we walked it forwards and backwards. And what I did is I handed out a sheet, one of the templates, the wonderful templates you guys offer there on GoLean6Sigma.com, of the 8 waste tracked by the acronym of downtime. And we were able to identify 7 solid problems in the process walk, 8 waste that we thought we could at least attempt to recover on. The biggest of all was as I mentioned earlier, the over 1,500 square feet of one storage room. We were supplying material until we could get it over into our anodizing line. But that wasted motion, transportation due to the bottleneck, you start seeing things like that, and it really helped us gain momentum for changing the processes that we needed to.
You just said something interesting that listeners might think is just a figure of speech, but you said you walked the process forward and backward. But I think you really mean that you walked it backward too, because you look at it a different way. Is that fair?
Yes, very fair. Most people only think about what's important to them before they get the material, but whenever you see how it suffers downstream, you really get a different idea of how important it is to get things right the first time.
Yeah, you sort of get the viewpoint from the people further down the process. You can somehow get lulled into thinking that it's just a natural flow and that's the way things are if you start from the beginning. But if you look from the end, it's more striking, as you say, how much scrap was making it so far.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said one of your solutions was to completely redesign the racks. Again, you had some really fun visuals on that, showing the old rotten wooden racks and that would degrade, I think, really quickly over a few years. And you replaced those with new metal ones. So how did you get agreement on, it looked like those would be more costly. So I was wondering how'd you get agreement on people to spend money on those, and how did you approach this newly designed rack?
Yeah, well, in my Black Belt project, I'd say the main hypothesis that I did that was able to really tie in on how big a problem it was the one proportion test I did, and I was able to show how large the increase in defects rates were from one year to the next. And ideally, whenever we sat down in our team to go over our fishbone diagram, it was the most mentioned area of opportunity. So the racks were on everybody's mind. They were just terrible wooden, nails would fly right through them. Frankly, you couldn't move material 20 feet without scratching it because the condition of these would totally wear out, sometimes within 2 years, but after 3 years, they were almost like a toothpick. They were terrible condition. What we were able to do is, as you can imagine, in a metal processing plant, from an overage standpoint and just original material that's going to get scrapped throughout any processes, we were able to take this originally scrapped material with the help of our brake metal and welding shop that we have right here on site and create these racks. So from a monetary standpoint, being able to do that on site in comparison to in the past, they would purchase the wood and build from within. It was a total push on the return on investment. We were able to use things in-house that typically we would have just taken maybe down to a scrap shop and thrown away.
So you had some recycling going on.
Yes, we did. And a lot of factors went into that. That's where we had to kind of jump into another thing there in DMAIC, the lax concerns suggestions route. It's another great tool. And when we realized the impact of not only the metal processing areas of our plant that are affected by these racks, we got everyone on board. We went as cross-functional as we could. We invited every forklift driver to the meeting. We got our fabrication team involved, like I said earlier, with our brake metal and welding guys. And we needed ideas on one standard rack that would work for all. So along with those guys, the fabrication team was able to add a ton of information. But what we went through, I'd say, 2 or 3 different prototypes, but we eventually changed the preset lifting length to this thing to where all forks would handle them and not have to adjust or customize their lifts. And on our campus, we're dealing with big time material. So we had to have something that had enough strength, stability. For the longest material, we have material up to 28 foot in length. But we also needed to have something that would maintain the features that are mandated by our safety department. We couldn't go over certain weights. So our safety department was part of our stakeholders there as well while we're redesigning that. Now, what we did from there is we were able to throw it into a little pilot situation. So we started out with 15. We put 5 each in each department: extrusion, anodizing, and paint. Of course, we assessed the risk of any type of process changes, how that would affect them, but we used them really heavy in circulation over the next 2 weeks, and that's how we were able to get some of the initial feedback from it. But eventually the feedback was unanimous. So at the time of that project, Elizabeth, I'd say we had 800 to 900 wooden racks in circulation. Not only have we spit all of them out, but up to date right now we have over 1,500 of these new metal racks in place, and it's made quite a difference.
And what a nice approach that you did, bringing everybody in, really understanding who your stakeholders were. And I love that you used LCS, and I'm just going to give a brief synopsis for the listeners. Likes, concerns, suggestions, one of the tools to help black belts get feedback from others is to actually ask people, first give your likes for an idea, say what's positive. Then you can say what your concerns are, but you have to pair each concern with a suggestion. So that ends up building on the ideas of others. So it's a powerful, really simple, but powerful technique. So I appreciate that you pulled that in. And then another thing you mentioned, which I thought was fascinating, you said, you fostered a mindset where people were greedy in a good way. And I wanted you to describe what you meant by that phrase.
Yeah, well, the Black Belt Project, although it was mainly focused on a defined group like material handling in this case, what made it such an intriguing department to tackle was that they are the one group of the entire plant that does affect all 3 departments. They touch extrusion, anodizing, and paint. Now, even though they may not get the material until it's out of extrusion, it's still a handoff that you would identify on a swim lane map that they have to work with them on. Now, I won't lie, there was a big selfish part of me there. I wanted to prove that a process improvement team here in a area of business that we haven't used a whole lot before, that we can add value to the organization. But it's something that's not always on the radar here. So I knew we were going to have to win these people over almost twice as good. But now that all these departments have been able to see these gains, they kind of want in on all the fun. We've essentially had a line that's formed to the left. So they see the benefits we made in one area and they want a little piece of the pie.
That's great. I love that it's considered they want in on the fun. So clearly we've seen an uptick in people signing up for green belt training, black belt training from OBE. So obviously you've had an impact on the lean culture, and that description you just gave is a really clear one. And I know you've got plans to translate solutions to other plants because you've got a lot of places you can replicate your best practices. And I wanted to know 2 things. What's your latest efforts? We've got just a few moments left here at the cafe, but I want to know, what are you most proud of? Just as a sign off to our folks, tell us, what are you most proud of?
Sure. On the latest efforts, I'll run through that one really quickly, Elizabeth. We were working on a project with raw paint cost from our facility here in Terrell to another one out in Tennessee. It's one of those where we have a significant gap, but we're trying to find areas of opportunities using eco-friendly paints. There's a lot of economical concerns over chrome-free types of paints, and we're trying to make sure that we're as green as we can be there. We're doing everything we can to track those, but our square foot to gallon ratios that we're coming across are just not the same from plant to plant, despite very similar lines. So I would say that's the next big project. Don't have a whole lot of information there. It will be a large cost-saving one, probably much larger than the one we dealt with on the Black Belt project. But to answer your main question there, what am I most proud of? I would say it goes back to the kind of culture that I think we're in the process of driving here. That project and the savings and lessons learned that we had from it, we've just had I would say, a near full conversion from these resistant, card carrying members of people who operated, really under the disclaimer of, well, this is how we've always done it. You can almost, put it on a shirt. That was the attitude we dealt with early on in the process, but I believe we're building believers here. You can tell that we've built some empowering employers, and it's really a pretty sweet deal. I think we got a big change going.
That's a nice description. Nothing sells like success, right?
Yep. Yep.
That's great. I appreciate your sharing that story, Jeff. It was obviously a great project that had some just foundational and formational discovery. So really nice to read about it and to hear that it's just led to more good stuff. So thanks again for joining us, everybody. That was Jeff Owens, quality engineer at Oldcastle Building Envelope. Thanks everyone else, our listeners, for joining us today, listening to the Just in Time Cafe, and we'll see you at the cafe next month. All right.
Okay. So I believe that brings us to the end of our podcast this week. So we hope you enjoyed this episode and you found it valuable. We'd love your feedback. So please give us a review on iTunes or on our website. And don't forget to subscribe. And I hope you can join us for some coffee the next time at the Just in Time Cafe.
Yeah. Iced or hot?
Either one will work.
Bye, Tracy.
Okay. Bye-bye, Elizabeth.
Thank you for joining us for Just in Time Cafe. Visit golean6sigma.com/podcast to share your feedback or listen to more podcasts. Also, please subscribe to Just in Time Cafe on iTunes.